In this video, I'm going to create a movie poster for one of my favorite horror animations called Monster House. This was the movie that really spooked me out as a child, actually making me fall in love with this genre. I rewatched it for Halloween and it is as creepy and amazing as I remember. This makes it a perfect video idea for Halloween. I'm going to tell you a little about this movie, but if you just want to watch the editing process, feel free to skip this part. In this movie, kids are being kids. They make up fantasies about creepy neighbors that no one really believes, because why would they? Monster House takes place on Halloween night, with people trick-or-treating, giving that ultimate Halloween feel. DJ is the main character, obsessed with his neighbor, the old man named Nebuchadnezzar, and his very creepy old house. Their first encounter is when DJ accidentally throws a ball into the old man's house. Nebuchadnezzar notices and chases after him, yelling at DJ to stay away, begging him to never come back. During his outrage, Nebuchadnezzar has a heart attack and dies on top of him. As DJ lays down to sleep that night, the house casts a huge shadow through the window with a massive hand on top of DJ. And everything starts from here. This has to be one of my favorite scenes from this movie. I won't reveal too much about this movie because I don't want to spoil it. I highly recommend that you check it out. It's a great movie for a Halloween night. Without further ado, let's create the spookiest edit I've ever made. First, I started to make the landscape for the poster. I masked out this bottom part and duplicated. I used warp so it doesn't look so straight. Then I added this grass with a brush. I added one more layer in the background. It's a distant background. I used the same brush for the grass. I warped this one too. Then I started to add the clouds. I fixed some of the background. I made it a little dark with the exposure. I made the first layer a bit darker. Then I kind of merged first and second layer and added the highlights. It didn't have the contrast with the clouds, so I added this kind of foggy background color with just white brush. Then I added the actual fog between the layers. I dropped the moon, obviously. It's night and we need some highlights. It's a great light source. I worked on it, I merged it with the clouds. And this is how it looks. Then I started to make the monster house with an actual house. I worked on it a bit, looking at my reference image time at a time. I added some old woody textures on the roof. After looking at my reference image, well, this looks bad. So I just started to make the monster house from scratch. I made the shapes and started to add the highlights, textures and all that. I added the same woody texture. I started to add this very dark color on everything. I just copy pasted everywhere. I added the same wood on the bottom. After that, I added the windows, kind of worked them around to make this feel like a monster house. And then I started to add more shadows between layers, using just exposure. After that, I chopped off some of the parts around the house because it was looking very smooth and straight, so I thought it would be a good idea. I added this circle so I could tell where the mouth is. I used the same brush. I made the brush more pointy and started to add these cracks. And started working on his teeth. I duplicated, I flipped it, and started to add more shadows between the wood because it was looking very flat. I worked on it more and dropped the house on the landscape. I positioned it well. Then I started to draw its hands so I would have an idea of what it looks like. I added the background inside of its mouth and started working on the lights. I just used normal hue and saturation. I did the same thing on both of the windows. I added some glow and started to add these highlights below the windows. I added some shadows below the house and started to make these green flames inside of its mouth. For this I used cloud brushes. After that I thought that yellow lights was kinda weird because it had green light coming out from its mouth, so I changed the windows to green and started to add these highlights on its mouth. I added some more highlights on the ground, some highlights on the house. After that I added the pumpkins, same thing with highlights and shadows. I thought the background was kinda empty, so I added this forest. I made it a little black. After that I started to add this wood texture on its hands. I used normal tree picture, dropped it, used some puppet warp. I clipped it on its hands. I chopped some of the parts to make it look more real. I did the same thing on the other hand and started to add more pumpkins. I placed the pumpkins in many places. I blended them, added shadows, highlights, normal stuff. After that I added some rain overlays, but everything was looking very dry, so I used this plastic rub in the filters gallery. And I definitely think it made it more wet. I added some gravestones, some highlights, some shadows. Then I started to make the chimney because I forgot. I added some grass in the foreground and started to add the camera raw filters. And this is the final result. And there you have it, our spooky monster house movie poster is ready. I hope you enjoyed this Halloween themed video as much as I did. If you're a fan of horror or just looking for a chilling movie to watch on Halloween night, I highly recommend giving Monster House a try. It's a nostalgic, creepy gem. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more content like this, make sure to like and subscribe. Your support really means the world to me. Feel free to share your thoughts and suggestions in the comments down below. I would love to hear from you guys. And as always, stay tuned for more exciting content coming your way. Until next time, happy Halloween and stay spooky.